God, guns, and guts. Three things that all of us could probably use a little bit more of, and that's what we're talking about here today at Poe Performance. But I'm not going to be doing it alone. You guys have seen my son Nick on this channel before, and he happens to be an accomplished author, minister, as well as book publisher. I'm going to link in the description down below, links to his content as well as to his website. If you want to publish a book, hit him up. If you want to buy his books, hit him up as well there on those contacts. He asked me to do this podcast, and I said, it sounds good. Then when he told me the subject matter, the God, guns, and guts, like, let's do it. Now, during the course of this hour and 15 minutes, we delve into business. We talk about toxic masculinity and that type of thing as well. So I think you'll really appreciate this. Don't think that you got to stare at the screen. Keep in mind, this isn't a product review where I've got to show you a gun or a holster or a belt or anything else. You can let this thing play, pop your earbuds in, walk away, and just listen. And before you know it, the 75 minutes will be up. It was a lot of fun to do this. It was an honor to be on his podcast, and we really had a lot of fun. So I hope you guys enjoy God, Guns, and Guts. It's coming up right now.
Folks, you have found the Inroad. My name's Nick, your host, and I'm joined today by someone I know very well, my dad, Brian Poe.
Thanks for having me, Nick.
Of course, it's a pleasure. We've got a lot to talk about. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I don't think I've seen one yet that's specifically targeted toward what we have in our crosshairs today, no pun intended. We're going to be talking about the national case for guns, the biblical case for guns, toxic masculinity, and a few more key trigger-worthy topics like that. A lot of people are confused in the church and out of the church as to why we have a Second Amendment, why it matters, why it's valuable, and how it can be leveraged for the good of a nation. And you know, I spend time in Europe, and I've had a lot of conversations with Europeans who, some of them have been not hostile, but very confused as to why this even exists. Mm-hmm. And then I've met other Europeans who are like, I get it, love it, wish we had a Second Amendment. Mm-hmm. So there's really, whether you're in Europe or Asia, South America, North America, you're going to find people on both sides of the aisle. So if you could kind of describe the value of the Second Amendment, why it matters, and how it's affected America thus far.
That is a deep question. I'll try to keep it short. The value of the Second Amendment. If we think about the Second Amendment and what it offers us in terms of the ability to protect ourselves, the founders knew that with all of the amendments, when they went back and revisited and said, wait a minute, we've got to add a few things to this Constitution. Mm-hmm. The First Amendment obviously is important. Freedom to speak your mind without repercussions or without being hanged or the guillotine. Mm-hmm. And how do you guarantee the first or the fourth or the fifth or the 10th?
Right.
To be able to defend yourself. And the founders knew by implementing this isn't just for self-defense. It's potentially against a tyrannical government as well.
Right.
If they try to overpower the people with weaponry, we have a means to defend ourselves. Mm-hmm. And some people argue, well, yeah, but there's no way you're going to fight the military with tanks. And truth be told, most military people will tell you they're not fighting against people. They swore to uphold the Constitution anyway.
Exactly.
They're going to be on your side. A lot of law enforcement and military. Now, would you have some defectors? Sure, they're probably undercover commies and socialists that don't care about rights anyway. It's just a job to them, and who cares? So that's what it means. It's the way that we can protect all of the amendments. Mm-hmm. And they're all important, but that one to me almost just kind of stands alone. You know?
Yeah, which I would call the insurance argument. Yeah, which a lot of people don't grasp. It's like saying, you know, if you live near a lake, you need flood insurance. And they go, oh, I don't need it. We're fine. It's not flooded in 50 years. And then 10 years from now it does. Yeah. That insurance you're going to be thankful for. People who argue against the Second Amendment often say, well, when's it going to become tyrannical? You know, when's America just going to try to overthrow the
Watch
people?
The news.
Yeah, no kidding. It's happened before, right? Well, America's young. It's the reason we overthrew the British Empire. because we said, we want religious freedom and to speak our mind. And so they the Second Amendment really equipped them. And that's sort of, it obviously serves a lot of purposes, but one of the most underestimated or least talked about facets of the Second Amendment is that it's an insurance policy. Mm-hmm. It's if this thing ever goes haywire, it's going to be really tough to go door to door and to say, go to the gulag.
Yeah, very tough. And it gives you a way to defend yourself. If you have nothing, just ask the people of Germany and Austria and, with Hitler and, the Jews and just everything that went on there. They had no means of protection. And it seems like when governments, every time when they want to take over a country or anything of the sort, it's the first thing is they obviously take away a method to protect yourself, and then they get into other ways also where they can manipulate and control. Mm-hmm. But you have to control the weapons. And that's why even a lot of the new gun laws, where they call them common sense, they're gun registries, and they're just ways to go backdoor and figure out who has which guns in which home. Uh-huh. That's a no-brainer. Why would they care otherwise?
Right.
Because when you fill out a 4473, which for people that aren't familiar, that's when you buy a firearm, it's a transfer, and the ATF either says that this person is good or bad, and they can go ahead and sell that firearm. Those are supposed to be destroyed. Supposed to be. Yeah.
Sure.
So they pretty much know which guns you're buying anyway, which gives us the opportunity, though, in states like Indiana with arms list and private sales. And there doesn't have to be a record of that transaction. And honestly, for good law-abiding citizens like myself and like yourself, it doesn't matter if there's a transaction or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, there was no transaction listed in 1776. Jefferson, in his massive library that he sold to the U.S. government, he didn't have a record of who had guns and who didn't.
Right. Because
it was just a normal given thing, which, one of the biggest arguments anyone hears, and I hope this podcast, if you're on the left or you lean left or you don't understand guns and you're listening to this, I hope you don't see this just as right-wing talking points. Mm-hmm. That's one thing I wanted to do with this conversation, was not just spit out the normal meme basically language about here's why we need guns, but to really dive deep and explain to people why. And one of the biggest arguments is things like mass shootings, things like innocent people dying at the hands of guns. And this actually just came up, I think it was the last time I was in Europe, where someone mentioned that, what about, people being shot, and I think maybe, guns should be banned. And I said, well, we have gun-free zones in the U.S., just like all over Europe. And they were like, really? I said, yeah, they're the most dangerous cities in the U.S.
Yeah.
So if you want safe communities in America, you have armed citizens, people who have private gun ownership.
Yeah.
And they really didn't have a response because I had data.
Yeah. There's statistics that prove it.
Yeah.
When people have sought out areas to do mass murder, I'm even careful to use the word shootings, not that it's bad, but I look at shooting as fun. I go to the range and shoot.
Sure.
But mass murder, they actually scope out areas that are gun-free zones, or free of law enforcement. They do their homework a lot of times, and that's been proven by these people who have pulled these off, and then they've told afterward, "Why did you select this particular theater, this area?" Because I knew it was a gun-free zone.
Yeah,
I mean, a gun-free zone. To me, it's a suggestion.
Sure, yeah. So you have another. You have another thing to look at. So politically, governmentally, we're for the Second Amendment. There's a number of reasons for that. But you also have this biblical side. We're believers. We have faith in Christ. And there are people who struggle to reconcile it. I've had even people approach me who have been really good-hearted and said, look, I'm for this. I grew up here. I believe that people should have guns. But biblically, where does that fall? Where does defense fall? And there's a guy named Bob Yandian who wrote a really good book called National Defense, and he really dives into deep stuff like the difference between killing and murder and how the Bible forbids one, but at appropriate times will allow for the other, right? Mm-hmm. So he dives really deep into that. And so I heard a minister who said, and I've told you this before, if someone broke into my home, I wouldn't, and tried to kill us, my wife and myself or my kids, we wouldn't fire back. We wouldn't kill back. We wouldn't. And his reasoning was basically sort of an oversimplified view of the gospel, where he said, Christ laid down his life so I could have life, so I don't have the right to take someone else's life. And for me, it's very simple. As soon as that guy breaks into your house, he took his own life. Mm-hmm. If I kill him, he signed his own death warrant.
Yeah.
And that's backed up biblically when God said in the Old Testament, if someone breaks into your home to steal, not even to kill, but he said to steal, and he suffers a deadly blow, you hit him with whatever they had back then, a club probably, maybe a sword, then you're not guilty.
Yeah.
His blood's not on your hands. So that provision was allowed. That wasn't law. That wasn't ritual. That was just God setting up government for Israel.
Right.
Which didn't end at the cross. It continued at the cross. And so biblically speaking, what do you think about the mandate we have to defend our households?
It's interesting you bring that up. Before this discussion, I was kind of thinking about that. And sometimes the argument is, well, that's Old Testament, or well, that's New Testament. Defending yourself, that's actually multiple times throughout the Bible, Old and New Testament. In the Old, like you said, they're building walls and fortresses around cities. That's a method of protection. That's a defensive mechanism. And in the New Testament, when Christ told the followers, essentially, I'm paraphrasing, but trouble's going to be finding you.
Yeah.
Sell your cloak, buy a sword if you don't have one. Now, he didn't mean to do that to shave the people that were going to come and, or cut their hair. It was a defensive tool.
Yeah.
It was a sword, and it was intended to do harm to the person trying to harm them. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what swords do.
Yeah,
it's a force multiplier. And then, really quick, touch on the point also where Christ laid down his life. But let's think about this. That was his purpose.
Yeah,
he
a unique
came here
purpose. Yep.
To do that.
Mm-hmm.
My purpose is not to die at the hands of a criminal who decided to break in and kill my wife and kids or grandkids.
Right.
It's not. My purpose is to provide and protect them.
Yeah.
Provide for and protect them. And so that's what I'm going to do. And it's mind-blowing to me to think that a man would allow someone to come in and harm their family and say it's not biblical for me to protect them.
Yeah.
And I wonder also if this person were put in that situation, really put in that situation, if they might just do the opposite. Mm-hmm. If they have an ounce of testosterone in their body, you would think they would.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe there's a deficiency, but a gun is a defensive tool. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it like this, if a bad guy gets a hold of a gun and decides to go on the offensive, put it in a sports analogy. You have an offense and a defense. The purpose of the defense is to stop the offensive person from doing what they're doing. Yeah. It doesn't matter what the sport is. Mm-hmm. If someone decides to be an offensive party, come into my home, corner me on the street where I can't escape, I can't get away from a situation, and that should be your first action. If you can avoid it, avoid it.
Yeah.
But if it comes down to lethal force, I'm going to defend what the offensive person is trying to do.
Yeah.
And if it means I have to multiply force to do so, which to me, let's say it's a gunfight. Mm-hmm. My idea of a force multiplier, since really gun versus gun, one doesn't have an advantage. That's where training comes in. Mm-hmm. And that's why going to the range is important. That's why even dry practice out of the holster with no rounds, live rounds, is important to get a feel for that firearm and to be responsible in case you ever did have to utilize it. Mm-hmm. So, and I know I'm kind of rabbit trailing onto more things there, but good. It all kind of ties in together there. I think.
Well, the Bible follows a pretty consistent logical flow. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously Christ walking on water is not logical. There's certain elements that are not logical. Yeah. But generally speaking, there is this normal logical flow. And I mean, even Paul talks about Christ being the head of the church. So a man is the head of the woman and the family. And basically calls her the savior of the body being the domestic realm, the physical realm. So we do have that duty to protect in that fashion. And I think where people go wrong is they leverage verses like turn the other cheek or love your enemies. Mm-hmm. And so what they think is God signing them up for pacifism, which is really, really a bad interpretation of Scripture. In fact, one guy said to me, when Jesus said buy a sword, he was talking about a spiritual sword, which is just... I mean, if you've been around church at all, people can spiritualize anything they want in the Bible.
So sell your physical cloak and be cold.
Yeah.
For a spiritual sword that you don't need to purchase anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I looked up that word sword in the wrong. Yeah. I looked up that word in the Greek, like any good scholar would, and it's a sword that's used to defend against robbers and wild animals. Mm-hmm. That's the lexicon, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's pretty clear, pretty cut and dry. That's the duty. And particularly, it's a man's responsibility to defend his household. If you're a single mom or whatever, or a woman who lives by yourself, then that's on you at that point. But I really believe, and maybe this is old-fashioned, there was someone who posted recently, do you believe in a marriage in egalitarianism or complementarianism? So egalitarianism would be that man and woman have an equal responsibility in every way in the home, which there's obviously equal value between a man and a woman. There's very few people would argue that. Whereas complementarianism believes that men bring a certain strength and then women bring a certain strength. And that was the conversation that was happening. And so I said I believe in complementarianism because if there's a scary sound outside at night, Laura and I don't do an egalitarian coin toss to decide who's going to go investigate. I grab the gun and do it. Mm-hmm. So men particularly have this role and this function. What does that mean to you? I know you had an instance where you've had some scary noises. And what does it mean to you as a man defending the household? And how does that relate to a culture that's increasingly becoming weaker?
Yeah, I'm exactly the same way. This equality thing, and I'm going to start here.
Sure.
Women can do things men can't. Men can do things women can't. Mm-hmm. And that should be so simple. And, I'm a logical person. And that to me is just a no-brainer. Women can have children. They can grow a human being inside of them, and we can't. Yeah. To me, that's that's a winner. That's like, that takes the cake.
Exactly.
It's amazing to me how that works. And that's special. And it's special in God's eyes. And, women operate for the most part out of emotion. Mm-hmm. They're nurturing. They care for kids. And as an example, when you had your accident, your mom went into this, he had broken his pelvis in 5 places, and his mom went into the nurturing mode and taking care of you. I was into this failure feeling, like I didn't protect my son. Same way when James had a shoulder surgery, and I thought, I'm going to go back. I've got the orthopedic experience, and I'm going to go back, right after when he's out of recovery, and I'll be the one back there to take care of him. I got physically sick because I couldn't do anything. That wasn't my role. And I knew that. And I was okay with saying, I went back out and I got your mom. I said, you got to go take care of him.
Yeah.
I feel like I can't do anything for him. I was supposed to protect him. Even though it's a planned surgery, it's innate, I believe. I was supposed to protect my kids. And that goes for any kind of hurt. And so that, without a doubt, there are things that I definitely defer to your mom with, and then that she defers to me with. But yet we come to conclusions at times, or a mutual agreement or a mutual disagreement, but then figure it out. Yeah. And how that works. And we both recognize each other's strengths as well as weaknesses. And I think admitting that is really big,
Yeah. And everything you're saying is, I'll just mention this real quick, is backed by data and tons of research. Yeah. So saying that, men are generally more logical, women generally operate out of feeling and emotion is not controversial.
Right.
Like, there's decades of social science diving deep into the brains of men and women that show an overarching pattern. Are there exceptions? Of course. Right. But generally speaking, those are the rules we're looking at. That's the standard we're looking at. But unfortunately, a lot of what you just said even would be considered controversial.
Yeah. In a weak society, like you'd mentioned, Yeah. And that's, the question arises. Every generation says, ours was better. And there is no doubt. Statistics are out there also. Many studies and polls, and just spend a little time in society. It is softer now than at any time in our history. I don't think there's a doubt. I don't think there's a doubt. And I think about the Revolutionary War and the fact that only 3% were willing to fight then. I wonder if you could get 3 out of 100 now. I wonder. And I may be overthinking that too, because we may have more of the smaller percentage willing to fight who would be. Yeah. Whereas you only could get 3% then. Maybe 5% are really strong and would now, but the other 95 wouldn't even consider it. Where there could be some gray areas in there too. So who knows? I hope we never have to find out. But
yeah, it's true. I actually heard John Piper talking about this, similar things to this, and he's the one who kind of mentions, he's like, men. Which something I really appreciate about Reformed preachers is they're very good on this subject. I'm not a reformed guy whatsoever, but they're good on that subject of men being men.
Right.
And he mentioned that, if there's a noise, you don't negotiate. And he's like, in fact, in the Muslim world, they don't believe in egalitarianism or complementarianism. Theirs is merit-based. So whoever in the marriage is good at doing one thing, they do. So in other words, if the wife is a karate black belt and the guy is not, then she should go out and do it. And he's like, sorry, black belt means nothing. It's still his role. It's still his job to defend his house. And I remember hearing this story. It was really tragic. Maybe you've heard this before. But there was a man who had his wife and 2 daughters, and a guy broke into their house at night and tied up the 2 daughters, killed them, killed the wife, knocked the dad out with a baseball bat, lit the house on fire. He wakes up from the smell of smoke, runs out of the house. His whole family's dead inside. And I would love to look at that preacher and people who say, you don't need a gun, you don't need to defend yourself, or it's not right to kill under certain circumstances, and have them explain to me why it's not better that guy would have just woken up, shot those 2 guys dead. They go out in a body bag. His family lives on.
Yeah.
That sounds like a better ending to the story.
Absolutely.
But it takes a lot of over-spiritualization, I think, to come to some of these conclusions.
Yeah.
I had a couple other topics I wanted to hit on, too. I know toxic masculinity was one of them, so I'll just get you started on that and let you talk for a bit, and then I'll just sort of...
I might talk for a long time.
I'll just sort of dovetail off of that. Where did it come from?
Not to get political, but it so much of buzzwords or topics like that, or descriptions of, I guess, a trait or characteristic, a lot of it can be, I wouldn't say blamed on social media, but social media just is out there in everybody's face. And a meme, an article, the news, it's everywhere. And all it takes is for a few talking points to be sent out, and then they just keep regurgitating the same thing, and people just start buying in. Oh, toxic max. If they say it on the news, it's got to be right. Or I read it here, it's got to be true. Toxic masculinity. I'd like to know what that means.
Yeah, same.
I really don't know what it means, because if toxic masculinity is me understanding my role as not just a protector, but a provider, I mean, is that toxic that I go to work and work 48, 50 hours a week to take care of my family? And to dovetail off that really quick, if you think about people who stay in abusive relationships, namely females, and I know there's, it works the other way too, but let's say that there's a male abusing a female. How many times have you heard, well, I stayed with him because he's a good provider?
Yeah. Yep.
He's a good provider, but what is he providing for?
Yeah.
Is it only to keep you there so he can abuse you? So he's not a protector? I think he's worthless.
Yeah, he's not masculine.
No, you can't have it both ways. You either have to be all in or not. And your job is to provide and protect. And so toxic masculinity to me, if you lift weights, people think you're toxic. If you have a little aggression, even if it's justified, it's toxic. They're just the view on females, how men view females. I'm sorry, but whether you are a Christian, a believer or not, there are certain ways that people look at females that are, and it may be, let's say, fleshly. It may even be wrong, but then there are ways you can correct that, and make that right. But still, the fact remains that's not toxic. We're designed a certain way. Yeah. And that's just all kind of encapsulated in that one package.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. Yeah. There's a book called Wild at Heart. I forget who wrote it, but it explains why men are the way they are and the differences between men and women. And that book has really helped women over the course of decades to understand why their husband acts the way he does. And, why little boys want to climb trees and hit stuff with sticks, and why little girls are generally wired different. And one of the biggest things I think we're facing right now is the wall between man and woman, the differences in genders is just being dissolved. And unfortunately, I think what you see happen is when a small group of, in this case, leftists, like pretty much primarily leftists, decide that there's no difference between men and women, gender is fluid, what happens is that doctrine gets attached to by people who are weak, and they start to believe it, then they start to act like it.
Yeah.
And I think that's why you see men becoming weaker, men failing to fulfill their duties, men who are afraid to defend and get a little dirty and work hard and sweat. I think it's because they're trying to fit into this societal narrative now that there's just no difference. So I guess my question would be, or something you could expound on, is to young men, because there are young men who listen to this podcast who would like to learn and absorb from you. What would you say to them about what strength looks like as they come of age and have their own family and things like that?
Someone who recognizes that they have flaws and is okay with that, I think. I think that takes a stronger person than someone to say, I'm perfect and I don't have any problems and I don't have any fears or anything else. Now, I would say this, and I don't mean this out of like bravado or anything else, but I don't really fear anything except losing a family member. And I don't know if you really call that a fear. It's the last thing I would ever want to happen.
Yeah.
And that's not a tough guy thing. That's just, I don't have anything to fear.
Yeah.
I don't fear death. I don't fear being injured. I've had a lot of those.
Yeah.
I got a lot of scars and surgeries and all. But then I look at a situation also that I grew up in, with my mom. And you want to talk about a strong person. And, you know, Grandma, obviously, she had my father passed when I was young. And so she remarried, but then had divorced. And she essentially raised us by herself.
Yeah.
And so she had to be the mom and the dad.
Right.
And the cool thing is my grandfather used to send Father's Day cards to her on Father's Day. I
Nice.
just thought that was...
That's awesome.
When you're overwhelmed sometimes by that role and your dad sends you a card like that, it was really awesome. But she embodies strength to me.
Yeah.
And my mom's tougher than nails. And I think I get it from not being afraid from her. I saw her endure some things and financial issues and health problems and just never lost the faith.
Yeah.
And so that's another embodiment of strength, from like a female perspective. So
right.
That had to play both roles.
Yeah. No doubt. There's a certain element of grit.
Yeah.
You just have to have. And if you weren't put into a position where you were forced into grit as a kid, you can still do it. Like even as an adult, as you're growing up, you may have, like Larry Blackstone, Coach Blackstone had this story where he went to a team dinner at one of his players' houses. He walked in, it's a beautiful house. I think its name was like Dan or something. He goes, "Man, Dan, it's a nice house. No wonder you're so soft." So there's that element where maybe you grew up in like a really good situation, really good setting.
Yeah.
So it'd be easy to be weak, but you can still do things to develop grit, to develop strength. And there's a book now that's out where it's really encouraging people to get back to their roots and what the book encourages men to take ice cold showers in the morning. Don't take a comfortable, cozy shower. Take an ice cold shower. Yeah. Don't use a GPS unless you absolutely have to, because that muscle in your brain that encourages where you can navigate, it's shrinking in people now. Generation after generation, it's like dissolving because we don't need it. So, only use GPS when you have to, unless you're running late or something.
Right.
So it just encourages these things to develop that physical grit, that physical toughness. But above and beyond that, it really is spiritual toughness, spiritual grit that matters most, which is the first thing you pointed to, which is humility. Admitting your weakness, saying, here's where I've come short. And when you do that, it's like God's able to come in and then build up that strength, build up that weak spot so that it becomes a strength and becomes something that's noble.
Right.
Where do you want to shift from here? There's a lot of direction we could go.
Really quick, I want to touch on the grit part and even the cold shower thing that you'd mentioned. I was reading about a USA wrestler at the Olympics. It's been years ago. And obviously you wrestled. I've tinkered a little bit with it in the jiu-jitsu world, but you flat wrestled for seasons in high school. And so you know how hard it is and how tough it is. You cannot be soft and be a decent wrestler. You can't. You couldn't even endure practice. No. Same with football. They're just different mindsets where you're going to hit or be hit. You're going to be taken down or taken out. It doesn't matter how you feel. Yeah. And I remember this wrestler, USA wrestler, talking about thinking how tough they are, and man, they're just strong and they're gritty. And it was in the Olympics, and I don't remember where it was. I don't know all the details, but the point of the story is went in after a practice at the Olympics. Maybe it was after a match. I don't remember. Went into the shower and the water's cold. And he's just like, oh, cold shower. A Russian comes in, a Russian wrestler, and he's a few stalls down.
Sure.
He walks in, turns it on. Now, this is under communism.
Oh, yeah.
He just took a shower like it was no big deal. And he said, I realized how soft we are in the USA. Now, this is years ago.
Yeah.
Where I still think we had a lot more tough guys then than we do now.
Yeah.
And he realized then, man, I'm soft. Here's a world-class wrestler who said he was soft.
Man.
Because this Russian gets underneath the cold water like it's not even an issue.
That's so funny. It's really, and then you start thinking about your own life. I look at my own life. I'm like, man, I complain about stuff too much. Little things or little inconveniences. And so those types of stories are really just a kind of a slap in the face. I've told you this story. We've talked about it before, but Terry Johnson, which I doubt he'll ever listen to this podcast because I don't think he knows how to use a computer. But he's a Vietnam veteran, a guy who's tough as nails, raised boys who are tough, but also really tender. He's really tender toward the Lord, which is a thing we get into next, the balance between tough and tender, because you can have that balance. But he said to me, he said, yeah, I had this tooth that had been bothering me for a long time. And he said, I complained about it and whined about it and moaned about it for about a year. And so I went into the doctor and I thought, I just need to be disciplined. And so he goes into the doctor and he says to the nurse, he says, I got to get this root canal. I don't want you to give me any numbing medicine. And so she laughed and said, oh, yeah. He goes, no, I'm serious. I've been whining too much, and I just need to cure this. And so she's like, oh, it's not going to work. Goes to the doctor. The doctor comes in, sits down, and says, well, hey, tough guy. You're trying to do this without any numbing medicine, huh? And he goes, yes, sir. So he had to sign like special forms to, I'm sure, for some liability agreement. And he went through an entire root canal, exposed root in his tooth with no medicine whatsoever, no Novocaine, no numbing, no nothing. He said the whole time I was squeezing the chair I was sitting on, and he said it hurt so bad his feet were elevated throughout the entire process, lifting him up, tensing his legs. And he looked at me, and I'm just stunned by this. And he goes, you know what? It worked. I don't think I complained once about anything for about 7 years after that.
Well, I tell you what, as a guy who's had a couple root canals, including one, even though I was numb, they went a little too far with a file and a root, and they hit a live nerve in my jawbone. Mm-hmm. I'm telling you, it's horrible.
Oh, I can imagine.
It's painful.
I can imagine.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, just watching that movie recently about World War I that Peter Jackson did called They Shall Not Grow Old. And if you haven't watched it, I strongly recommend it. It's a powerful movie, and it will humble you like crazy. These British guys in World War I were just tough and nasty and gritty and lived in horrible conditions, didn't have the right size boots, ate bad stuff. They said as long as I had green mold, we were good. If it was black mold, we wouldn't eat it.
Wow.
Just didn't care. And they came home, never complained, didn't whine about it, didn't talk about it. Their parents didn't ask about war. They just developed this real thing where they just put stuff in a box and lived. And I just feel like, I don't want anything bad to happen to society. I don't want war. If possible, I don't want war to be a reality, but obviously it is. So I don't want pressure to force people into being tough, but I'd love to see a generation rise up where they are just gritty. Mm-hmm. They are tough, and men do what men are supposed to do. Yeah. And the beautiful thing is that's what women want, I think. Yeah. At their core, they want a man who will lead, who will be tough, who will be gritty, but also tender at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say a decent woman for sure.
Yeah.
I think if you want somebody who's soft and takes a back seat and wants you to fight battles and confront everybody over everything, then I think that's an issue.
Yeah.
For sure.
No doubt about it.
Concerning.
Let's talk about, because we kind of covered the biblical case for self-defense and just touched on it. Obviously, we could go there more. The national case for guns and safe communities or with armed citizens. And I've talked about masculinity and strengths and weaknesses and things like that. If we could, I want to talk about, I just had it pulled up, situational awareness, which is something I know you've talked about a lot and is really important. What is it? What does it look like? Why does it matter to the people who are listening?
So many people think of, well, there's a difference in paranoia and preparedness. Uh-huh. And so they think if you're situationally aware that you're going to be some kook with your head on a swivel and there are ways to do it and watch out for situations potentially or real situations where you can foresee problems ahead of time. And if you think about that, that is the number one defense to what we talked about before with a good offense. If a bad guy is around and you see something developing and you can get out of the situation, you can get your family, safe, then do it. But that said, do you let them lay waste to innocent people who are unarmed and don't take care of themselves? I personally couldn't, but yet I want my family to be safe. And it's just, to me, it's so important to realize that the defensive use of a firearm, your intent is not to kill. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm going to kill this person. It's to get them to stop doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
And, I think the estimate, what was it? There's 1.2 million, maybe it's 2.1 million. Either way, it's in the millions of bad guys are stopped or defensive firearms usages per year in the United States. Many aren't reported. Now, that doesn't mean shootings.
Yeah.
It means you don't brandish a weapon, but if someone is approaching you and you're situationally aware and you can let them know, hey, listen, I got a firearm. I'll protect myself.
Sure.
Keep your family behind you. That's a defensive use of a firearm, but you're having to fire a shot. And that to me is perfect. That's the way it should be. Mm-hmm. But before that, if you watch a situation, let's say you're walking down a street and it's fairly bare and someone is walking across the other side of a sidewalk and they cross right where you are, nowhere near a crosswalk, that's a red flag. That's a problem to me. Why would you cross a street right where myself and my family, or if I'm alone, why it just doesn't, it's a red flag. It may not be anything. Sure. But what does it cost me to go ahead to a crosswalk and go the opposite way? Yeah. Or go into a building somewhere, a place of business. It doesn't cost me anything. There are situations where if you think about in a bathroom, there are a lot of brutal crimes that take place in public restrooms. Many, many brutal, violent crimes. And so when you're in those, there are ways that you can even look behind yourself, in paper towel racks, paper towel holders. Yeah. There's usually like a black plastic. You can see behind you. Mm-hmm. And before I stand there and wash my hands and just not pay attention and get clubbed in the back of the head, I'm just going to utilize that. I have to wash my hands anyway, and it's right there, and I can just kind of look around and even sometimes tile on a wall. You can see behind you. Mm-hmm. A lot of people will probably test this, and you can. There are ways you can see what's going on, and it just helps you prevent potentially a situation that would be awful. Yeah.
What do you say to somebody who says, well, you're just paranoid?
I would say you can call me what you want. But when you're the one that's getting mugged, robbed, your daughter or wife is getting raped, and mine isn't, or mine aren't, then, I'm okay with being called paranoid. Right. I mean, I carry a flashlight. I don't carry it all the time, but if I'm going to be out at night, I also carry a firearm with a weapon mounted light on it. Mm-hmm. I want to be able to illuminate, if I had to, what's there. Obviously, again, the defensive use of a firearm there's a lot of legal ramifications if you had to do it. And you should avoid it at all costs. Yeah. But a flashlight in my hand, number one, if somebody sees me, if I happen to be walking in a dark area, and as far as situational awareness goes also, some people go, well, hey, I carry a gun. And if you remember when you first started carrying, I said this, I carry a gun now, I can go into dangerous places. That's more of an excuse to avoid them. Exactly, yeah. Stay out of those places because you don't want to go through that mess. You don't. Right. The civil, the criminal, trials potentially are just, it's terrible.
You're going to have years tied up in it.
Years, and it breaks people financially, emotionally, marriages and everything else. It's rough. And so if I have a flashlight, let's say, and I'm walking toward my vehicle and it happens to be, maybe there's a light out in a parking lot. And situational awareness there, park underneath one of the nice lights. If you're at Walmart or a box store, park under one of the lights. It doesn't cost you anything. Right. That's not paranoid. That's just I'm parking under a light where I can see inside of my car before I even get in. Yeah. Locking your car isn't enough. There are ways people can get in. Mm-hmm. And typically when you read about situations like that, they hide in the back seat. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't suggest keeping a bunch of blankets or clothes in the back because they can cover up with that. Yeah. You get in your vehicle and you're hijacked or your throat slit or whatever. Shot in the back of the head and you never even saw it coming. So I'll carry a flashlight sometimes in those situations. It's small And if I can't see in the back of the car, I'll give it just a quick flash in the back seat.
Yeah.
That doesn't cost me anything either because I'm going to my car and it's just a quick, there's nobody in it.
Yeah.
And another thing that does, and I learned this from Aaron Cowan from Sage Dynamics. The guy is former military and I think current law enforcement. His content on YouTube is phenomenal. It's so good. But he says if someone sees you bring a flashlight up, their first thought is, that's a cop.
Mm-hmm.
Or that's somebody who's situationally aware. If they have a flashlight, they probably have a gun.
Good point. Really good point.
Yeah.
And that's, folks, pick one up for $7.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know some people recommend these really high end. Some of the best ones I've had literally are like $10, $12 lights, and you can get them cheaper.
Yeah. The main flashlight I have and use is it was like an exhibition, like trade show. It's like a free trade show flashlight type thing, you know?
Yeah.
I think you said something twice. You brought it up twice. It was really, really good point. It doesn't cost you anything to be situationally aware. People might listen and they go, well, that sounds like paranoia, or it's not that you're not at peace. I know you. It's not that you don't have a confidence in God as your protector.
Right.
It's not that, you're in any way living like a scratchy meth addict checking everywhere if somebody's going to hurt you, you know? It's just what I would call quiet observation.
Yeah.
And one of the ways, obviously you introduced this to me big time. And there were two other events in my life that caused me to become more situationally aware. And the first one was, I was not married, wasn't engaged, obviously no kids. I was having lunch with John Bryan, and he casually mentioned something about knowing how many exits are in a room that you're in, And I was like, what are you talking about? He goes, oh, anytime I enter a new building, I know where the exits are and how many there are. And I was like, whatever. I kind of brushed it off. So we were at lunch maybe like a couple weeks later, different place. I said, hey, how many windows and exits are there in this place? He lists them. He's like, oh, there's 8 windows and 2 exits. Just right away, he knew.
Yeah. And it didn't cost him a thing.
No.
You're sitting there anyway.
No, he just, as he's walking in, he just goes there, and there. We're good. And that's it. And to me, that kind of helped shift my mind. I was like, wow, this is a reality that, if crap hit the fan, you could get out of here.
Yeah.
And you'd be the guy to get me out of here, So I want to become that guy now.
Right.
Another thing was we were doing some like street outreach ministry type stuff, and we had services in the evening. So we're knocking on doors during the day, handing people flyers, inviting them to our service, and like food giveaways and stuff. And so I knock on a door, and Brian Hupp and Stephanie Hupp were there. It might have been Stephanie only, but one of the two were there. So I knock on a door, and I'm just standing there. And she goes, I used to be she used to work in the legal system, I think delivering forms or something, door to door, like court orders or something. And she said, we've been trained. When you knock on a door, you immediately step to the right. In case they open the door and swing, or they shoot through the door.
Right.
You never know.
Yeah.
Likely never going to happen. But just as a precaution, when I knock on a door, I always step to the right.
Yeah. Just takes one
Since
step.
then, I've always done that.
Yeah.
Even if I knock on the door for a random reason or a neighbor or something, I knock and then I move to the side. So little things like that have really helped me develop that situational awareness and that quiet observation to the point that I don't even think Laura knows how often I do that kind of stuff.
Right. And they shouldn't.
No.
That's our job.
Yeah, I shouldn't look at her when we're eating out saying, hey, I know where the exits are, and I'm wondering why that guy looks shady. And, I don't communicate any of that. We just do it.
Yeah.
And I think it's valuable. And I think you become the point man in those clutch situations.
That said, though, I will tell you this. I was really proud of your mom. She carries off body at times, purse carry, which a lot of women do. It's hard for a female to conceal carry in the waistband. It's just difficult because of the way they dress and their size and all. But she's actually accesses it really quickly. And she was in a situation in a parking lot where she got to the vehicle and I wasn't with her, and it was at Walmart, and she actually parked under a light, but there was a guy standing between our car and another one just toward the front end, just standing there. And so she stopped right away, and she actually had her zipper already undone out of the purse. And I mean, it was literally right here where she could. And so she'd already had that. She saw it ahead of time. And I told her, now he was harmless. It turned out, I think he had dropped something. I don't remember. He picked it up and he went on his way, but she noticed that right away. And she didn't just go jump in the car, which that's just a suggestion. If you ever get to your vehicle and somebody's there, don't get in your car right there. If you can, go to safety somewhere. Try not to give them an in, to be able to hijack you and take you where you don't want to go. But
yeah.
So that's the thing too, that you have to realize. If we're with them, I want them to relax and shop and do their thing, and I'll take care of just kind of, looking around and doing that. But if they're alone also, there's a certain level that I like to hear that I did notice there was a shady guy, or I saw this guy doing that, and she's giving me that feedback some, which is a good thing. Yeah,
that is really good. It's so good. That, like you said, doesn't cost you anything. It's not a big burden, and it's important. Laura sends me occasionally these articles that she reads, and some of it probably doesn't have much validity, but a lot of it does. And it's stuff where, people post on Facebook, hey, this guy, saw this guy at Walmart today who followed me down every aisle. And then another chick the next week reports the same thing, posts a picture of the same guy, who's just kind of stalking people and is questionable. Mm-hmm. That's it. That's where we are. That's in the Midwest. It's not just happening in bad neighborhoods in Compton or in the south side of Chicago, but there's a reality that you have to be aware. Yeah. And something I've continually gone back to is that passage in Romans 13. I think it's Romans 13, where Paul said, there are people who are placed in positions of authority who are ministers of God, who operate to strike down on those who practice lawlessness. Mm-hmm. And I always thought I was in ministry because I worked at a church. But if you're doing the duty of protecting, defending, and putting an end to physical harm, you're a minister. Yeah. Welcome to ministry.
Right.
You're a cop. You're in ministry.
You didn't even know that.
Yeah. So just being a protector is a ministry that God gives you that's really valuable. Yeah. And I think your approach is really balanced. It's not that anyone's trigger happy or wanting something bad to happen, but if it did, you're there,
right? Which
is really good.
Yeah.
Tell people about your YouTube channel if you would.
Yeah, it's Poe Performance, and it's funny. It started out as my gym channel. When I used to do strength and conditioning training for athletes, athlete preparation, and it started there. And I would post videos, and they were informational. And I also kind of learned on those too. But then it just kind of morphed, into the gun side of things as I became more involved in pistol shooting. I was a long gun guy for a long time. I deer hunted shotguns, muzzle loaders, even 22 rifles, and played around with those. But got more into the pistol thing then, and it's kind of hard to carry a shotgun concealed. So the pistols just make more sense. And I thought, I don't mind being in front of a camera. I'm going to give this a try. And it's funny because I thought when I first started these videos, hey, these are okay. Mm-hmm. And now I look back and they were just awful. They were just so bad.
Yeah.
They were really bad. And so I've gotten better equipment, now, and better mics. And I just provide input, I guess you'd say, opinion from a civilian who's never been in law enforcement. I've never been in the military, but I've had the pleasure of training and shooting with guys who have.
Yeah.
And so, man, I glean from them. I take that knowledge from them, and I try to apply those drills at the range. And there's so many things that you can learn. I realize you're just shooting paper targets, but when you video something like that for your YouTube channel, I've tried to get the point across that don't think of those as paper targets. Think of them as threats. You have to play that visual game, kind of like in practice when you're in a sport. You don't visualize that's your buddy.
Yeah.
You visualize that's the guy that's trying to embarrass you in front of your whole family and community on the basketball court or football field. And so you get in that mindset when you actually go to train and not just shoot. Mm-hmm. And so that's what the channel is really about. So
that's right. And it's grown a lot. How many subscribers do you have?
I think it's approaching 8,000. I know about 2 years ago it was about 15 or 1,600. And so it's grown from there. But the one thing I can tell you is it's 100% organic.
Yeah.
There is a big problem in social media with buying subscribers and buying followers. They're like, 1,000 for $12, something like that.
Oh, yeah.
I've actually found, I didn't know that was even a thing.
The Indian click farms.
People do it all the time.
Uh-huh.
And they swear they don't, but I've seen channels grow from, say, 11,000 people to 30,000 in 6 months. And the content is exactly what they've done for 3 years. Nothing groundbreaking. It's not like they have a one-of-a-kind gun that they're showing off. And so they do it because the result of that is a company reaches out and provides them freebies or provides sponsorship. So it all comes down to making easier money than it would be if you just grew it organically. But you're going to get the truth from me, my thoughts and opinions. I couldn't care less about my subscribership if it continues to grow or not. I don't do it for that. I would like it to, but only because people appreciate my approach, and that's honesty and just, like I said, an opinion on guns and gear, et cetera, from a civilian. And also, I'll still throw in workout videos. I've even combined workouts and training videos at the range. So I've still kind of kept the old
where origins. You do a curl in one hand and you shoot with the other. Gary Vaynerchuk?
I know the name.
He's like a real popular social media marketer and influencer.
Okay.
Anyways, his big thing is exactly what you just said. He said, make content and don't forget about your subscribers.
Yeah.
Forget about how many followers you have. And it seems like the people who do that grow the most. People who obsess over followers and subscribers don't, and they kind of get stunted. So you're whether you knew it or not, you're actually subscribing to like really good social media, YouTube marketing tactics.
I just think it's that's. I don't know. I'm a pretty simple guy. Before I was told I was complex.
Really?
It was by one of your sister's volleyball coach. So you're a complex guy, and I'm like, no, I'm really pretty simple.
Yeah.
Very logical and very sometimes almost too logical, and that's where your mom comes in and helps me think clearer. But yeah, that my channel is going to grow because it does, not because I'm forcing it to or anything else. It's just the way it is. And it's funny because you get on social media, whether it's Instagram or YouTube, you get people mad at you over your opinion and like, oh, I'm unfollowing or I'm unsubscribing. Well, trust me, I'm not going to beg you to stay.
Yeah.
I'm not. I'm going to give you my thoughts and opinions. And sometimes it's commentary. I didn't mention that also. There's political commentary and current events. And that really stirs things up.
Sure.
Which is fine. But again, it's my channel and it's my opinion. And people forget that.
Yeah.
Go make your own content if you want to put your opinion out there, or leave a comment. That's fine. But people really get their feelings hurt over your opinion, and it's really crazy.
Yeah, they do. It is wild. Somebody I was listening today was talking about Candace Owens, and she posted something, and he was saying it was really polarizing, and she's part of the problem because of how polarizing it was. I'm like, I just don't think she's interested in your opinion. She's interested in hers. Let her post what she wants to post. If you don't like it, go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean people have license to do whatever they want. There is a right and there is a wrong. But yeah, there is that reality that you're occupying a space online where you can say what you want to say. And if people don't like it, they can unfollow. Something I wanted to kind of shift and move to for the last segment of the podcast was talk about your bio, what you've done for work, the companies you've started. Because I have this philosophy. I don't want to, how do I say it? It sounds really clever when I don't have to think about it first. I don't want to know your opinion. I want to know what you've built. That's kind of this thing I've been hanging on to.
Unless you're on my YouTube channel.
Exactly. Or a better way to say it would be, I don't want to know your opinion unless I know what you've built, whatever.
Right.
And the reason I say that is because there's like a ton of 22-year-old life coaches on social, and it sucks. Anyways, what have you done for work? And then the companies you've started and how you've progressed to where you are today, and then where are you headed in the next 5 or 10 years?
I graduated in 1989, and so then it wasn't you are going to college. People would actually still ask. And it's funny because that's kind of come full circle again now, but then it was, well, are you going to college or are you going to go to work? And at that point in time, I wanted to go to college. I wanted to get into communications. I wanted to do sports broadcasting or work for a network. Ultimately, ESPN would have been just awesome. What a great gig that would have been. And so I went to a local college for a little while. I would have been a walk-on on a basketball team. I wasn't recruited, went to a small school, and I lasted a couple of months. And just life things and situations, it wasn't the right fit. I was miserable, didn't like it, and I said, I'm just going to go to work, and that was just the way it was. So I started out in metal fabrication, dirty work, horrible work, but around our area, manufacturing is where it is. It's just there's so many manufacturing opportunities in this area, namely the orthopedic field. And so I eventually got out of that metal fab work, thank God, because it was hot and nasty. And it was so dirty that you had to replace your clothes about every couple of months. You couldn't wash them with anything else. It was just horrible. So I've worked hard for very little money, and I know what that's like, but yet I was still providing. And there's value in that. It doesn't matter what you're doing.
Yep.
And so it's funny because that job, as miserable as it was, I was in the manufacturing side, and I had, there was a quality inspector position that had come open, and I thought, I'm not qualified for that. I'll never get it. So I didn't even bid on it. I was 19, 20 at the time.
You had one kid? Or was
Had James at that time. You weren't here yet. And the quality manager comes up to me one day. He was didn't say a whole lot. And he said, I noticed you didn't bid on that quality job. And I said, no, I didn't. He goes, I think you should.
Huh.
And I thought, all right, I'm not the smartest man in the world, but I'm pretty sure that means I should. If he tells me I should, that means I should.
Yeah.
End up getting a position, and that ended up leading to where I'm at now, which from then to now, I've worked at several orthopedic companies, one for about 15 years. And then I've been at where I'm at now at Zimmer Biomet for 6 years. And it's a great way to make a living in the manufacturing world. It's not dirty, hard work. And you're improving lives.
Yeah.
In 2012 at Depew, Coach Mike Krzyzewski from Duke came in, and he had 2 Depew hips. And so they did a PR thing where he came in, and we got to meet him and all, which was awesome as a Duke fan.
Sure, yeah.
But he actually said, this stuck with me, and I knew that what we did was helping people walk again and their quality of life. But he said that if it were not for, and he actually said it to me personally because we got a little time in the front with him, but he said, if it wasn't for what you do, and then he spoke in generality with the company, I wouldn't have been coaching past whatever year it was. Now, he's won 3 more national championships after the time he said.
Yeah.
So
you take
if you're
credit.
not a Duke fan, sorry, but the guy's one of the best coaches ever, probably in any sport, whether you hate Duke or not. The man's a phenomenal coach, and even better, he develops men. And getting to spend a few minutes with him, he was so genuine. And so to hear him say that, like, if it weren't for you all, so it's easy to go, Adam's going to work. It's work. It's work.
Sure, yeah.
No, I mean, especially what I do with orthopedics there, it's awesome. And then along the way, also a couple of companies, we actually got into the mixed martial arts promoting, which was awesome. That was a lot of fun. We caught it when it was really hot, had a really good venue here in town, the Wagon Wheel Theater, which was in the Round. We had some really good shows. We had several UFC fighters, either corner fighters, actually compete for us, and then make appearances as well. At the time, John Fitch did. He was number 2 in the world. Matter of fact, I was thinking the other day, that was like 2.5 months, 3 months before he fought George St. Pierre.
Wow.
So he was in our cage right there, hung out with us. We got to do a seminar with him, which was cool. So that was a neat opportunity. And then the state government got involved, would have taken thousands of dollars per show, and nothing would have changed. So I wasn't interested in that racket anymore. So
it's hard to believe a meddling bureaucracy.
Yeah, can you believe that?
Hurt a business.
Their intent was to shut it down, and there were a lot of shows that should have been.
Sure.
They were done in pole barns, and it was just horribly put together.
Yeah.
And anyone who knows our events knows that that's not the way it was. We did it on the up and up and professionally and with class, and then I also did the strength conditioning part with the gym there. And then in addition to training athletes to better prepare them to not just play their sport better, but injury prevention, which is really the ultimate thing that finally pushed me into that. I'm tired of seeing kids get hurt and missing out on seasons for preventable injuries.
Yeah.
And I don't know, once you're a coach or a teacher, it just always is there.
And you had a facility?
Had my own facility, and ended up selling that building. It got to be a lot between your younger brother, his schedule, and then your sister's volleyball schedule in college. It just wasn't fair to charge people a good chunk of money. I definitely didn't undervalue my services. I used to tell them, and it wasn't out of arrogance. It was based on the training that I'd received and the seminars that I'd attended, that you weren't going to get training like I was providing with 100 miles of my facility. So what you're going to pay is going to prevent you from getting bad training and potentially hurt or driving 90 minutes every time you go. And so I also dabbled a little bit with a local manufacturer here, even in making weightlifting equipment, collars, specialty weightlifting bars and that type of thing. I did that. That got to be really busy.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I've just kind of touched on a lot of things there. And, it's been fun, though.
So you're just kind of an opportunist. It's
Yeah.
like if you need to make some money, you just do this and do that.
Yeah.
And this is kind of fun. I'll monetize it.
Yep. Yeah. Why not? And I'm going to delve also into, I just showed you the paperwork a little bit ago to become an FFL and do firearm transfers. And now what I'm thinking along the lines of, as I approach 50, is I'm looking toward retirement. Somewhere between age 55 and 59 and a half, I'm going to be done working as far as full-time is concerned. May do some part-time contracting, but I'm looking at doing some pistol sight changes. No gunsmith work, but pistol sight changes, maybe some laser stippling on grips, firearms related things, and then transfers when people purchase firearms, which for the gun control people, that's what that is essentially. That's a safe way of transferring and say this person is doing it right. So whether constitutional or not, it doesn't matter. Just the point is that it does exist. So I'm looking at kind of a retirement gig with that. So, but I want to get it started now. I want to build up a clientele now, get it done early.
Yeah, that's terrific. Yeah. That's terrific. Something I've heard several times from several people, now that you're talking about work and businesses you've started and things, is, I've heard people say things like this. I've just been trying to find a job for a year, for 2 years, and I just can't find anything out there. And I assume I got this from you, probably one genetically, two through observation. But I hate that so much. I hate that because I see for hire signs everywhere. And so the issue is not that you can't find a job. It's that you can't find the job that you think you deserve. Get out there and feed your family. Provide. Just go get it. Do something. And there are seasons where you have savings and you could hold out for something better. I get all that. But generally speaking, unless you're disabled or there's something terribly wrong, if people can't find work, it's often because they don't want to. I know it depends on the area, but that's something that's really lacking. And it's really cool to see that you have just, over the course of time, you've said, hey, this could be monetized, so I'm going to start this business and do well with that for a while, make it profitable, and then either liquidate it or move on, and you've done that repeatedly. And I just don't think people realize how much money there is to be made out there through little ventures, through little niche markets. I heard Michael Hyatt on a leadership podcast the other day talking about how he just got into playing Native American flutes. And there's like a whole community online. And he hired a person to train him and it's this weird thing. He's like a massive CEO. And he found this niche market where people are making money and people are doing consulting work for Native American flutes.
Wow. So
people have no excuse to not go out and make money, to not go out and monetize things and get stuff done and create businesses and try and succeed, maybe fail some. And how have you, over the course of that time, I remember there was one point where you were running the martial arts fights where you're selling 800 to 900 tickets every other month for these shows, organizing the fighters, the travel, the bookings, the schedules, the concessions, the venues, weigh-ins, all of that. It's just a massive undertaking, plus working full-time at DePuy, plus several kids in sports, plus all the media attention because I'm a kid genius and people are coming to the house and, all this crazy stuff.
Wrong.
And then you're also running the gym. That overlapped at some point, right? How the heck did you do that? I would never do that.
I
would never do that.
Well, I mean, for one, having a support system, and believe it or not, though, I think if you prioritize your time, and I utilize my breaks at work even. My lunchtime was spent working, not at work, but outside things and immediately after work. And sometimes it might even be late. I went into work later at that time, so I would stay up even after you guys would go to bed for school sometimes and work for an hour and all. And some of that work, though, could be done sitting on the couch right there with your mom. With the laptop or even texting guys, which is one area of technology. It was really nice. I don't know how many fights I made on text.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to talk. I was right there chatting with your mom or even with you guys, and I could shoot a text and put it aside and wait to hear back. And so that was a benefit. So I just think utilizing your time wisely.
Yeah.
You have to. Now the travel part with sports definitely puts a kink in it, especially when you have multiple kids in sports.
Right.
And you're trying to do that, because even when I was having the weightlifting bars made, excuse me, and sending those out, I was going to UPS. I would have to package those and ship them, and they were big. I mean, they're weightlifting bars.
Yeah. And
sold 85 of those in just over a year.
Really?
So, I mean, that's like one a year if you think about it. Sold them on eBay and had them manufactured locally. And so that was even in there kind of with the gym. And so, but wow. I don't know, I mean, asking you, did you notice? I mean, it's not like I was non-existent, like I was gone all the time.
Right.
I mean, just utilizing your time wisely.
Yeah.
If I have to go in town at the time, we'll take the thing and ship it to UPS then. Then I'm away from my family kind of in one trip instead of dad's always gone or,
Right. Yeah, that's
whatever.
A really good point. And, something people have been talking about lately is there's this excuse like, well, I want to start a company. I want to be free financially, but I don't have time or whatever. And the question is, what do you do between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2 a.m.? And I work a lot after Laura goes to bed and after Pippi goes to bed.
Yeah.
I just do. It's a great time to work. There's no distractions. There's no pressure. And you feel like you get a second wind around then.
Right.
And I don't do that as much anymore because my company's kind of rolling and going and we're good. But at first, pioneering, plowing, gaining clients, and trying to prove ourselves, I worked a lot from like 10 to midnight, 10 to 3.
Yeah.
When I finished my first book, I looked at the clock. It was 3:33 a.m. I was still working at New Life at the time. So I woke up, I went to bed, slept for 2 hours, got up and went to work,
Yeah.
So there is that price that you have to pay. And but you're right, technology has made that job so much easier.
Yeah. And two things along there too that, from my YouTube subscribers, Nick has his own publishing company. He's not a college graduate. How'd you do in college, by the way, Nick?
I took 4 community college classes and I failed 3 out of 4.
And that's not to shame or embarrass. It's funny. We make jokes out of it. And you failed one because there was a test that you had taken because you wanted to go get food, and it was a time test online.
Yeah, there was a final. Yeah, it was 100 questions. I did 3 questions, and I was like, man, this just sucks. So I went and got a peanut butter and jelly and Doritos and ate, took my time, came back. It says, congratulations, you've completed your test.
You got 3 out of 100 if you got those right.
Yeah.
So, but the point being that, you took the initiative. You started a business that is successful and is growing at a really good clip. And so earlier I said about coming full circle where it used to be, are you going to college or not? For a while it was, you have to. We never told you guys that. That's totally up to you. And we even said, if you go to college, plan on paying for it yourself, but we will help whenever we can, which is what we did with Emily. She footed the bill for that.
Yeah.
And there were books that we'd pay for and everything else, but we did what we could. And so, that's just, I guess, a plug for your company there too.
Thank you.
You don't have to go to college. You don't have to be this highly educated with a master's or a doctorate to be successful.
It's true.
And I saw a meme just the other day. It was pretty neat, and it was guy X. We'd say X and Y. X went to college, $100,000 in debt, and he's an electrical engineer or whatever. And then on the other side, Joe went to a trade school, and makes $90,000 a year, and he cut off this guy's electricity, and that was just such a funny meme, and it's true.
It's so true.
Do the work.
I mean, I won't even go down this and get in these weeds because it's too much. But the way government involvement has spiked college prices since the 70s, well over 1,000%. And Laura, it wasn't. I don't remember. It was maybe a month ago. I think she saw someone who had spent like $100,000 in 4 years on college or something. She's like, is that how much college costs here? I said, no, that's how much college costs for that person who wanted to go to their favorite school, stay in their fancy apartment, and book everything on debt.
Right.
U.S. government apparently thinks that 17-year-olds are in a good position to take on $100,000 in debt with no backing, no collateral of any sort. And so I said, you could go to some community college You get a 2-year degree, pay very little. I don't know what the prices are, between $4,000 and $8,000. You could work and do that. Part-time, you could work and pay for that, and then finish out your 4-year degree if you wanted to. It does not have to be that expensive.
Right.
And the reality is, with trades now, like in a few years, they're saying that doctors and lawyers, their salary is going to be shifting to the trades, and tradesmen are going to be making a ton of money.
Yeah.
Because it's a field that's been neglected.
They're hard to find.
Yeah. They really are.
And the benefit also of like the orthopedic industry, I can speak to that, but there's other industries. You can work and make a good wage and supply for your family and go to college, and they pay for it.
Yeah,
Literally,
exactly.
the deal is at Zimmer Biomed is if you pass the class, they pay a certain amount per year. If you pass the class, if it's a C or better, they pay all of it.
Amazing.
And everything can be done online now. So you can do 5-week classes at, say, Indiana Tech, and they pay for it.
Yeah.
And so that's an option for kids as well.
That's a great alternative. Just, I mean, just hit the brakes if you're looking at saying, I'm just going to put everything on a $100,000 note for 4 years, because you're going to get out, you're going to struggle to find a job in your social science. And when you do, you'll make $34,000 a year, and you're going to have bills and kids, and you're going to have a couple $1,000s of discretionary money that you can throw at that loan every year.
Yeah.
And it's $100,000. Then you're going to want a house, and you need a better car. And I just can't. I'm so thankful to God that I did not sign up for a bunch of loan. And student loans are not a bad thing if it's marginal and stuff. Right. It's manageable. But overall, the way people just graduate, with some people who have like extensive degrees, I've been listening to Dave Ramsey, $1 million.
Oh.
There's like a dozen cases of people who have over $1 million in student loan debt.
Wow.
Drowning.
Yeah. I mean, just the interest on that. I can't even imagine.
Well, they're saying if I make minimum payments, this loan's going to outlive me. And with the government, you don't, like, it doesn't end because you die. I don't know how it works exactly, but family becomes culpable. And I don't know. I'm sure there's legal stuff you'd have to go through to sort through all that. But it's really a mess, and it's true. You just don't have to. Yeah. Certain careers, sure. I mean, I'm glad my doctor has a degree when he cuts into me.
You know, and your sister, she wanted to be a teacher, and she knew that early.
Yep.
Well, then you have to get a bachelor's degree, and she did.
Yeah.
And did really well. But her debt isn't very high at all. I know they paid some of that during school, and they've been paying immediately after.
Yeah.
And plus her grades helped a lot.
Yeah.
That and a volleyball scholarship paid a ton per year of her education. So there are options, though. There
really are. And all you have to do is look at people like Peter Thiel and some of these top-level entrepreneurs, Kevin O'Leary, and listen to what they have to say about college.
Yeah.
They all kind of say the same thing. Like, you don't have to do it. It's not what's going to make you rich.
Yeah.
I mean, if you just navigate money correctly and smartly, it can work for you.
Yeah.
And
Mike Rowe is another one. He's been pushing trades for years, and just now he's looking like the smartest guy in the room, which he always has been.
Yeah.
And he's right on a lot of things with that.
And the trades are like wonderfully beneficial careers.
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast where this plumber was on, and it was not a trades show like podcast, but this plumber is talking, and he's like, I work for myself. I make like $200,000 a year. He's like, very few people do what I do well. So landlords, if you get a landlord who owns 100 units and he likes you, well, you've got 100 units you can service.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to do it, hire somebody below you and use them as there's just a ton of money in trades. It's good work. Oftentimes it's clean work, electricians even. And there's really nothing wrong with that if people feel like they have a pull to that. But it's true. It is just a mindset. I was telling Brock the other day, I sent him an audio book of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I told him to listen to it and to read the book. And I think he will. Because it's all about, instead of working for money, making money work for you. It's about how to avoid paying a lot of taxes with like different types of investments and things. But it's very practical, really manageable. And it's backed up by the fact that it's the highest sold business book of all time, So if young people will grab onto these principles, I think it'll save them a lot of headache, a lot of trouble. Yes. Well, anything else you want to add? Where can people find you? What's your YouTube channel called?
Poe Performance. Check it out on YouTube. And you know what? I don't ask people to subscribe. This drives me crazy. We have a lot of gun channels now that at the beginning of video, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. And keeping with someone who, like I said, is just going to be genuine and straight, I would say watch 3 of my videos and see if it's the kind of content you want to see or not.
Yeah.
And then subscribe. If you like an individual video, go ahead and click like, or you can click don't. It doesn't really matter. I'm totally fine with either one, as long as it's the way you really feel. Instead of, you know what, this guy's shirt's dumb, or he shoots Glocks. I don't like Glocks, so I'm going to downvote, you know, that petty stuff.
Yeah.
But that's their choice also. I really don't care. So
there you go. Perfect. Yeah, I've never subscribed to someone because they asked me to.
No.
I'm just defiant like that.
I don't want to if they ask me to.
If I see their content's good and I don't want to miss it, then I subscribe. That's it.
And I've said that, like, if you like what you see, consider subscribing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to beg.
Yep.
And I'm certainly not going to be pretentious and arrogant enough to say, hey, go ahead and subscribe, because I know this is going to be really, really good.
Exactly.
No.
Well, sweet. Well, folks, thanks for listening. Thanks for checking out the podcast. It's available. I'm not going to ask you to subscribe, but it's available on pretty much every platform: SoundCloud, iTunes Store, Podcast Store, YouTube. And I think it might be syndicated in a couple other platforms. Anyways, thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.